Mitchell slipped through the dimly lit alleys of Zoravan Prime, his weathered delivery bag slung across his shoulder. The perpetual industrial haze that hung over the underground city cast everything in a sickly orange glow from the scattered vapor lamps. 15 years as a freelance career in this cesspit had taught him which corners to avoid and which bribes to pay, but it had never made him comfortable with the place. Zoravan Prime, the jewel of subterranean cities, if you ask the corporate propaganda vids. In reality, it was a stark dichotomy of gleaming corporate spires reaching toward a false sky and ramshackle settlements spreading like fungi across the lower levels. The wealthy lived above in their climate-controlled sectors, while people like Mitchell scurried below, making the system work one package at a time. He checked his wrist terminal, squinting at the delivery details again. The job had come through an anonymous broker, not unusual in itself, but the payment offered was 5,000 credits for a package smaller than his palm, to be delivered to an address in the industrial sector without any questions asked. It was the kind of sum that suggested either incredible importance or incredible danger. Probably both. Should have turned it down, he muttered to himself, feeling the weight of the small package in his inner pocket. But rent was due, and his food synthesizer needed repairs after the power surge last week. 5,000 credits would solve a lot of problems. Mitchell glanced at his terminal map again. There was a shortcut through the old manufacturing district that would save him 20 minutes. Usually, he avoided that area. It had been abandoned after the drone worker riots 5 years ago and had since become territory contested by various gangs and other things that preferred darkness. But tonight, he was already running behind schedule. Just this once, he decided, veering left into a narrow passage between two derelict factories. The silence was the first thing he noticed. Zoravan Prime was never quiet. Machinery hummed, people shouted, drones buzzed. Something was always making noise. But here, the ambient sounds seemed muffled, as if something was absorbing them. The second thing he noticed was the smell. Hot metal, ozone, and something else. Something primal and wild that reminded him of the illegal exotic animal fights he'd once delivered packages to. Mitchell quickened his pace, the uneven ground forcing him to watch his step. The feeling of being watched prickled at the back of his neck. He developed a sixth sense for danger over the years, and right now it was screaming at him. A crash echoed from ahead, followed by the unmistakable sound of energy weapons discharging. Mitchell ducked behind a pile of rusted machinery parts, his heart pounding. He should turn back. Whatever was happening ahead was definitely not something he wanted to get involved in. But curiosity, his perpetual weakness, made him peer around the debris. In the open area ahead, illuminated by sporadic bursts of weapon fire, a figure moved with impossible speed and grace. She, was humanoid, but clearly not human. Even in the poor light, Mitchell could make out fur or scales covering parts of her body, a sinuous tail lashing behind her, and claws that reflected the blue glow of energy weapons as they tore through the air. Her attackers, 6 of them, wore the unmarked tactical gear preferred by corporate security or high-end mercenaries. They moved with professional precision, but they were clearly outmatched. The Beastwoman leapt 15 feet into the air, flipping over 2 of them before landing in a crouch and slashing outward. Blood sprayed in an arc across the concrete. Mitchell forced himself to look away. Whatever this was, gang warfare, corporate enforcement, or something else entirely, it wasn't his business. He needed to leave before he was spotted. As he shifted his weight to retreat, his foot dislodged a small piece of metal that clattered across the ground. The sound, insignificant in normal circumstances, seemed deafening in the momentary lull of combat. The Beastwoman's head snapped toward him, eyes glowing an eerie amber in the darkness. Mitchell froze, his survival instincts screaming at him to run, while knowing it was already too late. She dispatched her final attacker with casual brutality, then moved toward Mitchell with fluid, predatory grace. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe as she approached. Up close, her features became clearer, a face almost human but with subtle alien angles, covered in fine dark fur with striped patterns. Her eyes were vertical pupilled and intelligent. Blood, some hers, mostly not, matted the fur on her arms and chest. I was just passing through, Mitchell managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't see anything. The Beastwoman tilted her head, studying him with unnerving intensity. Then she smiled, revealing sharp. Canines. Wrong place. Wrong time, she said, her voice surprisingly melodic despite the guttural accent. Yet, right scent. Before Mitchell could process her words, she moved. Even expecting it, he couldn't track her speed. One moment she was 3 feet away, the next her face was inches from his neck. He felt a sharp pain as her teeth sank into the junction between his neck and shoulder, followed by a burning sensation that spread outward from the bite like liquid fire. He cried out, more in shock than pain, as she pulled back, her eyes now glowing brighter. With one clawed hand, she traced a symbol on his chest, her nail cutting through his jacket and shirt to leave a shallow mark on his skin. The symbol burned even more intensely than the bite. You are mine now, she said simply, her expression unreadable. Mine. Then she was gone, vanishing into the shadows with the same supernatural speed with which she'd fought. Mitchell slumped against the debris, his hand going to his neck. It came away with blood, but not as much as he'd expected. The burning sensation was fading, replaced by a strange numbness that spread throughout his body. He looked down at his chest, where she'd marked him. Through the torn fabric, he could see a symbol that resembled nothing he recognized, curved lines intersecting with jagged angles, already scabbing over despite having been made seconds ago. The package. He suddenly remembered his delivery. With shaking hands, he checked his inner pocket. The package was still there, apparently undamaged. Somehow, that seemed important, though he couldn't focus on why. Mitchell staggered to his feet, determined to complete his delivery and then get home. Whatever had just happened, he needed time to process it. One step at a time. That's how he'd always survived in Zorvan Prime. But as he made his way through the remaining stretch of the manufacturing district, he couldn't shake the Beastwoman's words from his mind. You are mine now, Mine. Mitchell completed his delivery on autopilot. The recipient, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit, barely registering in his consciousness. The 5,000 credits transferred to his account, but even that brought him little satisfaction. All he could think about was getting back to his apartment and examining the marks she'd left on him. His apartment was a single-room efficiency unit in a tower block that had seen better centuries. The environmental controls were temperamental at best, and the water recycler made concerning noises, but it was his. Mitchell secured the 3 locks on his door, stripped off his jacket and shirt, and went to the small, cracked mirror in his bathroom alcove. The bite on his neck had already closed, the skin around it slightly raised and tinged with an odd bluish hue. The mark on his chest was even stranger. What had been a bleeding scratch was now a fully healed scar, the symbol clear and distinct against his skin. As he stared at it, he could have sworn it pulsed faintly with an inner light. What the hell did she do to me? He whispered, touching the mark gingerly. The burning sensation had completely subsided, but in its place was something else. A presence at the edge of his consciousness, like knowing someone was in the room behind you without turning to look. It wasn't painful or even unpleasant, just deeply unsettling. Mitchell took a long, scalding shower, as if he could wash away the encounter. When that failed, he tried covering the marks with bandages, but somehow that felt wrong, almost sacrilegious. Finally, he gave up and collapsed onto his bed, exhaustion overcoming fear and confusion. His dreams were vivid and strange, flashes of alien landscapes, battles fought under unfamiliar stars, and always those amber eyes watching him. When he woke the next morning, drenched in sweat despite the apartment's faulty cooling system, he felt different. The differences were subtle at first. The perpetual stench of the lower levels, a mixture of industrial waste, too many bodies in too little space, and the fungal growths that thrived in the humid lower sectors, had always been background noise to his senses. Now he could distinguish individual components, The metallic tang of coolant leaking 3 floors down, the spicy aroma of synthetic noodles from his neighbor's unit, even the distinct personal sense of people who had walked down his corridor hours ago. His hearing, too, had sharpened. The constant hum of the city's machinery resolved into individual sounds, the specific rhythm of each cooling unit, the distinct frequencies of different power conduits. It was overwhelming, and Mitchell found himself bracing against his wall, eyes closed, trying to process the sensory overload. "This isn't happening," he muttered, but even his own voice sounded different to his enhanced hearing. When he finally mastered enough control to leave his apartment, more surprises awaited him. His body moved differently, faster, more gracefully. He caught a mug that would have normally clattered to the floor with reflexes he'd never possessed. A gap in the walkway that usually required a careful step was cleared without thought. And the mark seemed to have a will of its own. Throughout the day, as Mitchell attempted to maintain his normal routine, it would occasionally pulse warmly, particularly when he thought about the Beastwoman or when he entered areas similar to where he'd encountered her. It was as if it was trying to guide him or respond to his thoughts. The next week passed in a haze of confusion and growing isolation. Mitchell still took delivery jobs. He had to eat, but he avoided anything that would take him near the manufacturing district. He spoke to no one about what had happened or the changes he was experiencing. Who would he tell? He had acquaintances, but no real friends in Zoravan Prime. That was how most people survived here. Connections were vulnerabilities. But as the changes progressed, as he found himself able to leap distances that should have been impossible, as his nails thickened and sharpened slightly, as his night vision improved dramatically, he knew he needed answers. Mitchell began cautiously asking questions in the city's shadow markets and information dens. He described a Beastwoman matching his attacker, but left out any mention of the mark or his own transformation. The reactions were telling. Some information brokers simply refused to engage, returning his credits without a word. Others grew visibly nervous, looking over their shoulders before hurriedly changing the subject. Only one, an ancient vendor of questionable stimulants who operated from a converted storage unit in the deepest levels, offered anything concrete. "Sounds like an Iranian," the old man wheezed, his eyes cloudy with cataracts but still shrewd. "Not many of them left. Warrior species from a dead world. Bad business, courier. Very bad business. Stay away. What do you know about marking?" Mitchell pressed, desperate for any information. The old man's milky eyes widened, and he grabbed Mitchell's wrist with surprising strength. "She marked you? Fool. You're already dead, or worse than dead. They only mark their prey or their mates, and you don't look like her dinner yet." Before Mitchell could ask more, the old man shooed him away, mumbling about bad luck and contagion. That night, the dreams were more intense than ever. He saw the Beastwoman, an Iranian, if the old man was to be believed, fighting battles across star systems, a member of a proud warrior culture. He saw their planet die in fire, the survivors scattered. He felt her isolation, her rage, her determination. And most disturbingly, he felt her awareness of him, as if she was experiencing the same connection from her end. Mitchell woke to find his apartment trashed, furniture overturned, walls scratched, food packages torn open. It took him several disorienting moments to realize that he had done this himself in some kind of fitful, dream state frenzy. Looking down at his hands, he saw that his nails had grown even more claw-like overnight. "I'm becoming like her," he whispered, horror and fascination warring within him. The mark on his chest pulsed, almost like an affirmation. Mitchell was forced to acknowledge that he needed to find the Iranian woman again, not just for answers, but because something in him was being inexorably drawn toward her. The mark created a connection that was growing stronger, not weaker, with time. Sometimes, when it pulsed, he could swear he caught glimpses of what she was seeing, feeling what she felt. He avoided the manufacturing district for 3 more days before the pull became too strong to resist. Finally, as dusk created even deeper shadows in the perpetual twilight of Zoravan Prime, he returned to the scene of their encounter. The area was deserted, the bodies of the attackers long since removed by whatever cleanup crew handled such matters in this lawless zone. Mitchell stood in the center of the open area, closed his eyes, and focused on the mark. It warmed under his attention, pulsing with a steady rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat. "I know you can sense me," he said aloud, his enhanced voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "We need to talk." Nothing happened for so long that Mitchell began to feel foolish. Then, a soft sound behind him, the deliberate scuff of a foot that was too controlled to be accidental. A warning. He turned slowly, careful to keep his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. The Iranian woman stood 20 feet away, her stance alert but not immediately aggressive. She was cleaner than during their first meeting, her dark fur gleaming in the dim light. She wore fitted clothing of an unfamiliar material that seemed to shift colors slightly with her movements. "You came back," she said, her head tilting curiously. "Brave. Stupid, but brave." "You didn't give me much choice," Mitchell replied, gesturing to his chest where the mark lay hidden beneath his shirt. "What did you do to me?" She approached slowly, moving with that same liquid grace that had so entranced and terrified him during their first encounter. "The Irith Kai," she said, as if that explained everything. When he stared blankly, she elaborated, "The hunter's claim. The bond." "Bond," Mitchell echoed, trying to keep the rising panic from his voice. "I'm turning into something else. I need to know what's happening to me." The Iranian stopped a few feet from him, studying his face with those unnerving amber eyes. "You're changing, yes. The Irith Kai reshapes you, makes you compatible." "Compatible with what?" "With me," she said simply. "With my genetic code. With my life force." She gestured vaguely at the space between them. The bond formed slowly. "It was not meant for your species, but your body adapts well. Better than expected." Mitchell took an involuntary step backward. "You're saying you're—" "What?" "Transforming me into an Iranian?" She made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No, you remain human, but enhanced, stronger, faster, more aware." Her expression grew more serious. "It was necessary. I was wounded, hunted, needed an anchor to this world. And you had potential." "Potential?" Mitchell repeated, incredulous. "You ruined my life on a whim?" Her eyes flashed dangerously. "Not whim. Survival. The corporation hunts me. Without the bond, I would have been captured, perhaps already dissected." She tapped her chest, mirroring the location of his mark. "The Irith Kai connects us, strengthens us both. Ancient practice of my people. And what am I supposed to do now?" Mitchell demanded. "I can't control these changes. I destroyed my apartment last night because of some kind of episode." The Iranian nodded, as if this was expected. "Early bond is unstable. I will teach you control." She paused, seeming to consider something. "My name is Gina," she added, the human name incongruous with her alien appearance. "Gina," Mitchell repeated, the name feeling significant somehow. "I'm Mitchell." "I know," she said. "The bond tells me many things about you, Mitchell." Before their conversation could continue, a high-pitched whine cut through the air, the sound of anti-grav engines powering up nearby. Gina's posture immediately shifted to alert, her ears flattening against her head. "They found me," she hissed. "The trackers in their bodies, I should have been more thorough." She grabbed Mitchell's arm with surprising gentleness despite her claws. "Run. Now." They fled together through the labyrinthine remains of the manufacturing district, Gina leading with unerring precision through passages Mitchell hadn't known existed. Behind them, the whine of engines grew louder, accompanied by the heavy footfalls of what could only be assault troops. "Who's hunting you?" Mitchell gasped as they ducked through a partially collapsed wall. "Helix Corporation," Gina replied without breaking stride. "They seek Iranian biological technology. Our adaptive genetics. Our weapons." Mitchell had heard of Helix, one of the megacorporations that effectively ruled Zoravan Prime from their gleaming towers above. They specialized in biotechnology and genetic manipulation, with rumors of ethically questionable research programs that operated beyond government oversight. "Why you specifically?" he pressed as they emerged onto a narrow maintenance catwalk overlooking a vast empty space that might once have been a factory floor. Gina hesitated before answering. Was Royal Guard, protector of the last genetic repository of my people. Her expression hardened. Until Helix's agents destroyed our sanctuary ship. I survived. The repository survived. They hunt both. The implications hit Mitchell like a physical blow. She wasn't just some random alien fugitive. She was a protector of what remained of an entire species' genetic heritage. And now, through the mark, he was inexorably tied to her mission. As if to emphasize this connection, the mark on his chest pulsed warmly, and for a brief, disorienting moment, he saw himself through her eyes, sensed her assessment of his potential, her growing respect for his resilience, and underneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made his breath catch. The moment passed as a spotlight swept across the catwalk ahead of them. Gina pulled Mitchell down into a shadowed alcove, her body partially covering his in a protective gesture. They have trackers, she whispered. Can follow genetic signatures. My blood from the previous fight. Mitchell suddenly understood. And those men you fought, they had trackers in them? So Helix could follow even if they died. Gina nodded grimly. Expendable soldiers. Death expected. I was careless. The spotlight passed, but the sounds of search teams grew closer. Mitchell made a decision. My apartment, said. It's not far from here, in a residential block too crowded for them to risk an open assault. We can regroup there. Gina studied him for a moment, then nodded. Lee, they moved through the shadows, Mitchell now taking point, using his newfound senses and agility to navigate the treacherous landscape of Zoravan Prime's lower levels. Every step felt more natural than the last, as if his body was finally discovering capabilities it was meant to have. They reached Mitchell's residential block without incident, but caution made them take a service entrance and climb up through emergency access passages rather than use the main lifts. When they finally reached his small apartment, Mitchell felt a strange sense of embarrassment at its shabby condition. It's not much, he said as he secured the locks, knowing they wouldn't hold against a determined Helix assault team for more than seconds. Gina seemed unconcerned with the accommodations. She immediately began examining the apartment's layout, checking sightlines to the door and windows, cataloging potential weapons and escape routes. Your territory is defensible, she said finally, which Mitchell took as high praise from a warrior. She settled into a cross-legged position on the floor, her tail curling around her. Now, questions. Ask. Mitchell had dozens, hundreds of questions, but he focused on the most pressing. This marked the Irith Kai. How do I control it? And the changes? Gina gestured for him to sit opposite her. The Irith Kai responds to emotion, to intent. Your human mind fights the changes, causes chaos. She placed a clawed hand over her heart. You must accept what you are becoming. Not Iranian, but not merely human either. Something between. What's the purpose of these bonds among your people? Mitchell asked, trying to understand the cultural context. Many purposes, Gina replied. Warriors bond battle partners for strength in combat. Researchers bond for sharing knowledge across distance. Mates bond for life. She looked away briefly. I use warrior bond. Most suitable for survival. Mitchell absorbed this. So I'm like your battle partner now? In a way. Incomplete yet. She indicated his chest. Bond grows stronger with time, with trust, with shared purpose. And what is our shared purpose? Mitchell asked, his voice hardening slightly. I didn't ask for this. Gina's amber eyes met his. Survival. First mine, now yours too. Helix will hunt you as they hunt me. You carry my mark, my genetic imprint now. To their sensors, you appear valuable. The reality of his situation sank in fully. There was no going back to his old life, no pretending this hadn't happened. He was irrevocably changed, physically and circumstantially. Then teach me, he said finally. Teach me how to control these changes, how to fight like you do. If we're going to survive, I need to be an asset, not a liability. Something like approval flickered in Gina's expression. Good. We begin now. The training began immediately, despite Mitchell's exhaustion. Gina led him through a series of meditative exercises designed to help him connect with and control the new aspects of himself. She demonstrated how to focus his enhanced senses rather than being overwhelmed by them, how to modulate his strength to avoid breaking objects accidentally, how to move with the natural grace his altered body was capable of. It was grueling, frustrating work, but by dawn, Mitchell had achieved a level of control that seemed impossible hours earlier. The mark on his chest no longer felt like a foreign presence, but an integral part of him, pulsing in harmony with his heartbeat. As sunlight began to filter through the apartment's small, grimy window, Gina finally allowed him to rest. Mitchell collapsed onto his bed, physically and mentally drained. Before sleep claimed him, he watched through half-closed eyes as Gina assumed a guard position near the door, her posture alert despite hours without rest. "Do you ever sleep?" he murmured. "When necessary," she replied softly. "Rest, Mitchell. Tomorrow we plan our next move." Their respite was brief. Mitchell woke to Gina, shaking him roughly, her expression tense. "They're coming," she hissed. "Many. Heavily armed." Mitchell was instantly alert, the bond amplifying his awareness. He could hear them now, the subtle sounds of a tactical team trying to move quietly, the faint electronic beep of scanning equipment, the whispered communications. "How do they find us?" he asked, already moving to gather essential supplies. "The bond," Gina said grimly. "It strengthens, becomes more detectable, especially with both of us in close proximity." They had minutes at most. Mitchell grabbed a backpack, stuffing it with energy bars, water purifiers, a portable charger, and his savings in physical credit chips. Gina watched this with apparent approval. "You adapt quickly to fugitive life," she observed. "Zoravan Prime teaches." "Survival," Mitchell replied, slinging the pack over his shoulder. "Where can we go?" "They'll have the building surrounded." Gina moved to the window, peering carefully through the grime. "Down as expected, up as not." Mitchell understood immediately. The residential tower's upper levels were technically off-limits to lower-level residents like himself, protected by security systems he'd never had reason to bypass. But with Gina's combat skills and his own enhanced abilities, "The roof," he said. "If we can reach it, we might be able to cross to the adjacent tower." They moved swiftly, exiting the apartment just as the sounds of the tactical team reached their floor. Instead of heading toward the emergency stairs, they found a maintenance access panel that Mitchell had noticed but never explored. It opened to reveal a narrow shaft filled with cables and pipes. "Maintenance routes for repair drones," Mitchell explained, squeezing into the tight space, "should lead up to the environmental control systems on the roof." The climb was arduous, the space barely wide enough for them to maneuver. Several times they had to stop and press themselves against the walls as maintenance drones hummed past, their simple sensors apparently unable to distinguish the fugitives from the machinery around them. They emerged onto the roof just as dawn broke over Zoravan Prime, the artificial lighting system gradually increasing to simulate daylight. From this height, the vast underground city stretched out before them, a chaotic sprawl of structures built on and around each other, connected by bridges, catwalks, and transport tubes. "The adjacent tower," Mitchell said, pointing to a slightly shorter building connected to theirs by a narrow maintenance bridge. "It's residential too, but a different corporation owns it. Might buy us some time while jurisdictional issues get sorted out." Gina nodded, already moving toward the bridge. They were halfway across when a roof access door burst open behind them, disgorging a squad of Helix security personnel in full tactical gear. "Targets acquired," a mechanically enhanced voice announced. "Surrender, or we will use lethal force." Gina pushed Mitchell forward. "Run," she commanded, turning to face the threat. Mitchell hesitated, torn between self-preservation and not abandoning his bond partner. In that moment of indecision, he saw Gina in combat for the second time, and it was even more impressive than the first. She moved like liquid lightning, closing the distance to the Helix squad before they could properly aim their weapons. Her claws flashed, severing critical components of their armor and weapons rather than going for killing blows. It was surgical, efficient, and terrifying. But there were too many of them, and they were adapting to her tactics. One managed to fire a net of crackling energy that caught Gina's leg, sending her stumbling to one knee. Without conscious thought, Mitchell found himself moving back toward the fight. His body seemed to know what to do, even if his mind didn't. He leapt over Gina, landing between her and the advancing security team. Something primal and fierce rose within him. Not quite human rage, not quite alien battle fury, but a protective instinct amplified by the bond. He snarled, the sound shocking even to his own ears, and attacked. Mitchell had never been a fighter. He'd survived in Zoravan Prime through avoidance and negotiation, not confrontation. But now, guided by instincts that felt both foreign and natural, he tore into the Helix team with savage efficiency. His movements weren't as refined as Gina's, but they were powered by a strength and speed he was still coming to terms with. Together, they fought their way clear, leaving the Helix team disabled but mostly alive. As they sprinted across the remainder of the bridge to the adjacent tower, Mitchell felt a strange elation mingled with horror at what he'd just done and what he was becoming. They didn't stop running until they descended several levels and found an abandoned maintenance room to hide in. Only then did Mitchell allow himself to process what had happened. I fought, he said, staring at his hands. The nails had extended further during the combat, becoming more claw-like, and there were traces of blood under them. I've never fought like that in my life. Gina was examining a burn on her leg where the energy net had caught her. The bond. It shares instinct fighting knowledge. She looked up at him, something like pride in her amber eyes. You fought well. Protected me. Is that what the bond wants? For me to become a warrior like you? Gina shook her head. The bond is no wants. It connects. What flows through connection is up to us. She finished tending her wound and moved closer to Mitchell. You chose to return to the fight. To protect. Mitchell couldn't deny it. When he'd seen Gina in danger, something fundamental had shifted inside him. The bond hadn't forced him to act. It had simply given him the capabilities to follow his own instincts. We need a plan, he said, changing the subject. We can't keep running forever. Helix has too many resources, too much reach in Zoravan Prime. Gina nodded grimly. True, we must find a way off-world. The repository must reach the surviving Iranian colonies. Repository? Mitchell asked. You mentioned it before. What exactly is it? Gina hesitated, then reached into a hidden pocket in her clothing. She withdrew an object about the size of her palm, a crystalline structure that seemed to shift and move internally, glowing with a soft blue light. The genetic heritage of my people, she said quietly, holding it with reverence. Not just DNA sequences. Memory, culture, history, thousands of years stored in living crystal. Mitchell stared at the object in awe. And Helix wants this? To what end? Iranian adaptive biology is valuable, Gina explained, carefully returning the repository to its hiding place. Our ability to bond with other species, to enhance and be enhanced, to adapt to almost any environment. These are technologies Helix would weaponize. Sell to highest bidder. And if they captured you? Mitchell asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Dissection. Experimentation. Gina's voice was flat. I'm last Rogard. My genetics are optimized. Perfect specimen. The clinical way she described her potential fate chilled Mitchell to the bone. It wasn't fear he heard her voice, but resigned acceptance of a warrior's risk. So we need to get off-world, he said, refocusing on their immediate problem. Zoravan Prime has dozens of spaceports, but they're all heavily controlled. Not all, Gina said. During reconnaissance, I found smaller facilities, smuggler ports, corporate secret launches. Mitchell considered this. I might know someone who can help. A former client who specializes in unconventional travel arrangements. But it won't be cheap, and he's paranoid. Approaching him with Helix on our trail is risky. Alternative? Gina asked simply. There isn't one, Mitchell admitted. Unless you have a spaceship hidden somewhere. Gina's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Not anymore. They spent the next several hours planning. Contacting Mitchell's smuggler acquaintance would require moving to a different sector of Zoravan Prime, one with less Helix influence. They would need to acquire new clothing to blend in better, as both Mitchell's courier uniform and Gina's distinctive attire were too recognizable. They would need weapons, supplies, and most critically, a way to mask their biological signatures from Helix's scanners. The bond complicates this, Gina explained. Two linked signatures, easier to track than one. Distinctive pattern. Can be shielded somehow? Mitchell asked. Gina considered this. Temporarily. There are compounds, rare minerals that disrupt scanning technologies. Expensive. How expensive? More than courier can afford, Gina said bluntly. Mitchell thought for a moment, then reached a decision. The package I was delivering the night we met. The client paid 5,000 credits. I still have most of it. Gina tilted her head. Significant sum. Why save? I was planning to leave Zoravan Prime, Mitchell admitted. Save enough for passage to one of the outer colonies. Start fresh where Megacore have less control. He laughed bitterly. Guess I'm getting my wish, just not how I planned. They moved cautiously through the lower levels, using Mitchell's knowledge of rarely traveled maintenance passages and abandoned sections. Gina's enhanced senses allowed them to avoid patrols and security drones, while Mitchell's familiarity with the city's rhythms helped them blend in when they couldn't avoid populated areas. They acquired new clothing from an unattended laundry processing facility, civilian attire that wouldn't draw attention. For Gina, this included a hooded cloak to obscure her more obvious alien features. Mitchell was surprised to find that with the hood up and in the dim lighting of the lower levels, she could almost pass for human, a testament to the genetic similarities that had made their bond possible. The Black Market Quarter was located in a sector formerly designated for waste processing, the constant stench and machinery noise providing excellent cover for illicit activities. Here, Helix's influence was minimal. The corporation preferred clean, controlled environments for its operations. Mitchell led Gina to a seemingly abandoned processing tank, its exterior rusted and forbidding. He knocked on a particular panel in a specific pattern, waited, then knocked again. After a long moment, the panel slid aside to reveal a narrow passage. Keep your hands visible, Mitchell murmured to Gina as they entered. The proprietor is jumpy. The passage opened into a surprisingly well-appointed chamber filled with display. Cases containing minerals, compounds, and devices of clearly illegal nature. Behind a reinforced counter stood a thin man with synthetic eye implants that whirred softly as they focused on the newcomers. Mitchell, the man said, his voice artificially modulated to disguise its natural tone. Unexpected. Who's your friend? Someone who values privacy as much as you do. Vernick, Mitchell replied carefully. We need scanning countermeasures. The best you have. Vernick's synthetic eyes zoomed in on them, various scanning beams visibly passing over their forms. Interesting readings you're giving off. Both of you. His tone sharpened. Helix biosignatures. You're marked by their trackers. Mitchell tensed, but Gina placed a restraining hand on his arm. Not by choice, she said, her voice measured. We seek to mask these signatures. Vernick seemed to consider this. Helix is a valuable client. Informing them of your presence would be profitable. With a movement too fast for Mitchell to follow, Gina was suddenly across the counter, her claws resting very gently against Vernick's throat. Unprofitable for your continued respiration, she said softly. To Mitchell's surprise, Vernick laughed. I like her, he said. Direct. Efficient. The synthetic eyes whirred again. Iranian? Yes? Thought your kind extinct. Nearly, Gina acknowledged, not moving her claws from his throat. Helping us remains in your interest. I imagine so, Vernick agreed. Especially since Helix has been suspiciously interested in exotic biological technologies lately. Competition is healthy for the market. He glanced at Mitchell. 5,000 credits. For both of you. Mitchell winced. That's everything we have. Then it's fortunate I'm not charging more, Vernick replied smoothly. Consider it an investment in future business opportunities. The transaction completed, Vernick provided them with small devices that, when activated, would scramble their biosignatures for approximately 12 hours at a time. Not permanent, he warned. In proximity to high-grade helix scanners will reduce effectiveness. But for general movement through the city, adequate. He also, unexpectedly, offered another piece of information. There's a private launch scheduled from Facility 23 in 2 days. Corporate execs heading to the pleasure stations in orbit. Security will be focused on keeping people out, not checking those already inside too carefully. He slid a data chip across the counter. Access codes. Outdated by hours, but a skilled slicer can update them. Why help us? Mitchell asked suspiciously. Vernick's synthetic eyes focused on Gina. Let's say I'm curious to see what an Iranian might do if given a fighting chance. It's been a long time since anything interesting happened in Zoravan Prime. Armed with their new countermeasures and information, Mitchell and Gina continued their journey through the labyrinthine depths of the city. They found temporary shelter in an automated storage facility where robotic systems were the only monitoring presence. Easy enough for Gina to temporarily disable. As night fell, or what passed for night in the perpetually illuminated underground city, they sat side by side in their small, secure space, planning their next move. If Vernick's information is accurate, we have 2 days to find a way into Facility 23 and update these access codes, Mitchell said, examining the data chip. I can update codes, Gina said. Iranian royal guards trained in infiltration technologies. Mitchell looked at her with new appreciation. You're full of surprises. Survival requires versatility, she replied simply. As they continued discussing strategy, Mitchell became aware of a change in the bond between them. The mark on his chest felt warmer, more integrated with his being. The sense of Gina's presence in his mind was stronger, clearer, less an intrusion and more a welcome complement to his own thoughts. The bond strengthens, Gina observed, clearly sensing the same shift. Your acceptance accelerates process. Is that good or bad? Good for survival, she said. Greater coordination. Shared strength. She hesitated, then added, but more detectable to helix scanners. Countermeasures more important now. Mitchell nodded, understanding the trade-off. What happens when the bond is complete? Will I keep changing? Gina studied him thoughtfully. Changes stabilize. You remain you, but enhanced. Perfect balance between human and bond gifts. She touched her own chest, mirroring the location of his mark. Connection remains. Distance becomes irrelevant. Thoughts, feelings, shared if we choose. The implication of such a deep connection was both appealing and terrifying. Mitchell had spent his life maintaining distance from others, a survival strategy in Zoravan Prime's dangerous social landscape. The idea of someone having access to his thoughts, his feelings. Yet oddly, with Gina, the prospect didn't frighten him as much as it should. Perhaps the bond was already influencing him more than he realized. Why did you choose me? He asked suddenly. There must have been others you encountered before me. Gina was silent for a long moment. Many factors. Physical compatibility, mental resilience. But mostly, she seemed to search for the right words. You saw me fight. Saw what I am. Yet your first instinct was not hatred or fear, but acceptance. Rare quality. Mitchell remembered that moment. His shock at her alienness, yes, but also his immediate recognition of her beauty, her grace, her power. He hadn't feared her. He'd been awed by her. I still didn't consent to be marked, he pointed out. True, Gina acknowledged. Necessity overrode protocol. In normal circumstances, bonding is ceremonial, chosen by both. She looked directly at him, her amber eyes intense. I apologize for taking choice from you. The simple sincerity of her apology caught Mitchell off guard. From everything he'd seen of Iranian culture through their bond and their conversations, apologies were not common among her people. I understand why you did it, he said finally. And I'm starting to think maybe it wasn't entirely random. This connection, it feels right somehow despite everything. Gina's expression softened slightly. Bond knows what conscious mind does not. compatibility goes deeper than surface. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by a distant alarm. They both tensed, Gina's ears swiveling toward the sound, while Mitchell instinctively reached for the weapon they'd acquired. "Not for us," Gina said after a moment. "Different sector, but reminder of danger." They completed their planning and settled into rest, taking turns keeping watch. When it was Mitchell's turn to sleep, he found himself slipping easily into dreams that seemed to blend his memories with Gina's. Lush alien landscapes merging with Zoravan Prime's industrial corridors. Battles fought across stars bleeding into his courier routes. Through it all ran a sense of purpose and belonging that had been absent from his life for as long as he could remember. The next day saw them moving steadily toward Facility 23, using their countermeasures to avoid detection. The launch site was located in one of the upper sectors, requiring them to ascend through increasingly well-monitored areas. They used maintenance shafts, commercial transport containers, and, in one creative instance, posed as maintenance workers repairing environmental systems. As they neared the facility, the risks increased. Helix's presence was stronger here, among the corporate sectors where their legitimate business operations were housed. Several times they had to detour to avoid security checkpoints with advanced scanning technology that might penetrate their countermeasures. "The facility will be heavily guarded," Mitchell observed as they crouched in a ventilation hub overlooking their destination. Facility 23 was a sleek, modern structure with multiple security rings and a central launch pad currently being prepared for departure. "Expected," Gina replied. Her eyes narrowed as she assessed the defenses. "But focus is external. They guard against intruders, not escapees." She set to work on the access codes, using a small device she'd assembled from components they'd acquired in the black market. Mitchell watched in fascination as her clawed fingers moved with delicate precision across the interface. "Corporate ships have standard emergency protocols," she explained as she worked. "Escape pods, safety measures. We board as maintenance crew, hide until launch, then access separate pod during flight." "Won't they track the pod?" Mitchell asked. Gina's lips curved in a slight smile. "Pod tracking systems, remarkably similar to waste ejection beacons. Easy to modify trajectory reporting." Mitchell couldn't help but be impressed. "You've done this before." "Infiltration is Royal Guard's specialty," she confirmed, though usually with better equipment. As night approached, they made their final preparations. The corporate launch was scheduled for dawn. Executives preferred to travel while their underlings were beginning their workday, a symbolic reminder of their elevated status. They applied temporary pigments to alter their appearance slightly, donned maintenance uniforms stolen from a supply closet, and activated their countermeasures. The plan was simple but risky. Use the updated access codes to enter through a service entrance, make their way to the launch vehicle under the guise of last-minute preparations, and conceal themselves until takeoff. "If we're separated," Gina said as they prepared to move, "continue to orbit. Repository must reach safety." She pressed something into Mitchell's hand, a small fragment of the crystalline structure he'd seen before. "Insurance. Partial backup." Mitchell understood the immense trust this represented. She was literally placing a piece of her people's future in his hands. He carefully secured it in an inner pocket, close to the mark on his chest. "We won't be separated," he promised. Their infiltration began smoothly. The updated access codes worked perfectly, granting them entry to the facility's maintenance level. They moved confidently, as if they belonged, nodding to actual staff they passed. Mitchell had spent years perfecting the art of being unmemorable, and Gina followed his lead admirably, keeping her alien features shadowed by her hood and cap. They were halfway to the launch bay when disaster struck. A security alert blared throughout the facility, accompanied by an announcement. "Attention, all personnel. Bioscanners detect anomalous signatures. Possible contamination alert. All staff report to security checkpoints for scanning." "They know," Mitchell said grimly, watching his staff ahead of them began moving toward designated scanning points. Gina's expression turned fierce. "Plan changes. Direct approach now." Before Mitchell could respond, she was moving, her maintenance uniform discarded to allow freedom of movement. He followed suit, the bond between them surging with shared purpose and determination. They ran toward the launch bay, no longer attempting to hide. Alarms blared around them, and security personnel appeared at intersections, weapons drawn. Gina moved through them like a force of nature, disabling rather than killing, her movements a blur of controlled violence. Mitchell fought at her side, his own enhanced abilities allowing him to hold his own against trained security forces. The bond between them pulsed with energy, and Mitchell found he could almost anticipate Gina's movements before she made them. They fought as a coordinated unit, covering each other's vulnerabilities, amplifying each other's strengths. It was exhilarating and terrifying, a dance of violence that felt almost beautiful in its synchronicity. They burst into the launch bay just as the corporate ship was preparing for departure. Executives in expensive attire stared in shock as the blood-spattered pair fought their way toward the vessel. "Stop them!" a voice commanded over the facility's communication system. The Iranian must not escape. Mitchell recognized the voice with a chill. Dr. Erling Voss, Helix's chief research officer, a man whose public persona was that of a visionary scientist, but whose name was whispered with fear in the lower levels of Zoravan Prime. "Voss," Gina snarled, her ears flattening against her skull. "Destroyer of worlds." They fought their way to the ship's boarding ramp, now just meters away. Security forces were converging from all directions, and Mitchell knew they had seconds at most. Then, from a side entrance, a figure emerged, tall, immaculately dressed in Helix corporate attire, with cold eyes and a thin smile. Dr. Voss himself, surrounded by elite security in powered armor suits. "Specimen Gen 7, Voss said, addressing Gina with clinical detachment. "You've led us on quite a chase, and you've even provided a bonus, a partially bonded human subject. Fascinating." Gina's growl was low and dangerous. "You destroyed our sanctuary ship. Kill my squad." "For what?" "Corporate profit. For advancement," Voss corrected. "Your species' genetic technologies are the key to the next stage of human evolution. Too valuable to leave in the hands of a dying race." While Voss spoke, Mitchell noticed something. The ship behind them was still powering up, its engines cycling through pre-launch sequences. The executives had not disembarked despite the security situation. They seemed more annoyed by the delay than concerned about the violence. An idea formed in Mitchell's mind, communicated to Gina through their bond without words. She gave no outward sign of acknowledgement, but he felt her agreement. "Your research is flawed," Gina said to Voss, taking a step toward him that drew all attention to her. "Iranian bonds cannot be artificially replicated. They require mutual consent, compatibility. A technical challenge to overcome," Voss replied dismissively. "With enough test subjects, we'll isolate the necessary factors." While all eyes were on Gina, Mitchell quietly moved toward the ship's external control panel. His years as a courier had familiarized him with most transport systems in Zoravan Prime, including launch protocols. There was an emergency departure sequence designed to activate in case of facility compromise. "Last chance to surrender peacefully," Voss was saying to Gina. "Though I assure you, your cooperation is optional from a research perspective." Gina's response was a snarl of defiance. "As is your survival." She launched herself at Voss with blinding speed, seemingly intent on tearing through a security detail to reach him. The powered armor troops moved to intercept, energy weapons charging. It was the distraction Mitchell needed. He reached the control panel and activated the emergency launch sequence, immediately triggering alarms throughout the bay. The ship's boarding ramp began to retract automatically as safety protocols kicked in. "Launch sequence initiated," an automated voice announced. "Clear bay for immediate departure." Chaos erupted. The executives inside the ship shouted in confusion. Security forces split their attention between Gina and the departing vessel. Voss shouted orders, trying to regain control of the situation. Gina disengaged from her attack and sprinted toward the retracting ramp. Mitchell was already running, using his enhanced strength to leap the growing gap. He landed on the edge of the ramp, turned, and extended his hand. Gina jumped, her powerful legs propelling her through the air as weapons fire erupted around her. Their hands connected, the bond between them flaring with shared purpose, and Mitchell pulled her aboard just as the ramp sealed completely. Inside, they found themselves facing a dozen stunned executives and their personal security. Before anyone could react, Gina moved through the cabin with precision, disabling the private security with efficient strikes, while Mitchell sealed the inner doors to prevent any emergency override of the launch sequence. "This vessel is now commandeered," Gina announced to the terrified executives. "Cooperate and survive." The ship lurched as it disconnected from its moorings, automated systems taking over to guide it safely out of the facility. Through viewing ports, Mitchell could see Voss's diminishing figure, the executive's face contorted with rage as his prizes escaped. The executives were secured in their luxury seating areas, while Mitchell and Gina made their way to the control deck. As Gina had predicted, the ship was equipped with escape pods, small, short-range vessels designed for emergency evacuation. "We need to move quickly," Mitchell said as he examined the ship's systems. "Once we clear the city's environmental dome, they'll send pursuit craft." Gina was already programming one of the escape pods. Trajectory set for orbital transition station. From there, we can secure passage to outer colonies. Mitchell joined her at the pod's controls, marveling at how naturally they worked together, each anticipating the other's needs through their strengthened bond. The mark on his chest felt warm, pulsing in harmony with his accelerated heartbeat. As the ship broke through Zoravan Prime's environmental dome into open sky, they transferred to the escape pod. Gina activated the modified beacon that would misreport their trajectory, hopefully buying them precious time. The pod detached with a metallic clunk, small thrusters guiding it away from the main vessel on a course that would appear to Helix's tracking systems to be headed for an uninhabited region when in fact they were bound for the bustling orbital station. As Zoravan Prime receded below them, its vast underground city now visible as a massive complex partially built into the planet's surface, Mitchell felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief at escaping, concern about their uncertain future, but mostly a sense of rightness, as if his life had been leading to this moment, this partnership, this purpose. "What happens now?" he asked, watching as the blue curve of the planet's atmosphere gave way to the star-filled blackness of space. Gina's amber eyes reflected the starlight as she turned to him. "Now we find my people, deliver the repository, ensure a radiant future." She paused, studying his face. "Your future, too, if you choose. Bond is permanent, but path is yours to decide." Mitchell thought about the life he'd left behind, the lonely existence of a courier, always moving, never belonging. He thought about what he was becoming through the bond, stronger, more alive, connected to something larger than himself. He touched the mark on his chest, feeling its warm pulse synchronized with Gina's own heartbeat. "I think my path is clear," he said, "wherever the bond leads us." Gina's expression softened into what Mitchell now recognized as an Iranian smile. She reached out, placing her hand over his where it rested on the mark. "Then we face stars together," she said simply. The escape pod continued its journey toward the orbital station, carrying them toward an uncertain future filled with danger and pursuit. Helix would not abandon their quest easily. Dr. Voss would marshal every resource at his disposal to recapture them. But for the first time in his life, Mitchell wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. The bond had given him more than physical enhancements. It had given him purpose, connection, and a partner with whom to face whatever came next. "Mine," Gina had said when she marked him that fateful night. What had begun as a claim of possession had transformed into something far more profound, a declaration of mutual belonging, of shared destiny. As the stars streamed past their small vessel, Mitchell finally understood the true meaning of her words. He wasn't just hers. They were each other's, bound not just by an alien ritual or biological changes, but by choice and trust forged in the crucible of survival. Whatever the universe held for them, whatever challenges Helix and others might pose, they would face it together, two beings from different worlds united by a bond that transcended species and space. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Mitchell looked to the future not with dread, but with anticipation.